The great chamber of the Conclave of
Distinguished
12
members, the time for
stretched
action
upward
is
like
now.
a cathedral made of light. Representatives from the 12 most powerful species in the known galaxy sat in their elevated pods, looking down at the small human woman who stood alone on the speaking platform below. Ambassador Elena Vasquez had made this walk before. 60 years of human diplomacy. 60 years of petitions, requests, and formal appeals. 60 years of being told to wait, to prove themselves, to earn their place among the stars. Today would be different. She could feel it in her bones. The United Terran Congress formally requests, once again, equal standing in galactic affairs, Elena said. Her voice was calm and clear. We ask for voting rights in trade negotiations. We ask for protection under the Conclave security agreements. We ask to be recognized as a sovereign species with full diplomatic status. Then, from the Rithani pod high above, came a sound that Elena had heard too many times. Laughter. The young species grows impatient, said Delegate Vorath, his long neck swaying with amusement. Perhaps in another century, when your people have learned proper patience, we might consider your request. More laughter rippled through the chamber. The Cathari delegate covered her face with her wing in what might have been embarrassment, but she said nothing. The Drexy representative simply looked bored. Elena stood perfectly still. She had expected this. She had prepared for this. But preparation did not make it hurt less. The Conclave thanks the human representative for her continued dedication, announced the presiding officer, a massive Thornaki, whose stone-like skin showed no emotion. Her petition is noted and will be reviewed in the standard time frame. The standard time frame. Another 10 years of waiting. Another decade of being treated as children, playing at civilization. Elena bowed slightly and walked out of the chamber. She did not look back. 3 days later, everything changed. The colony of New Valencia had been established 40 years ago on a mineral-rich world at the edge of human space. It was a peaceful place. Families lived there. Children went to school there. Miners worked hard and dreamed of better futures there. The Drexy hegemony had decided they wanted the planet's resources. When the human colonial government refused to surrender their mining rights, the Drexy did not negotiate. They did not threaten. They simply sent their warships and opened fire. The attack lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 40,000 human beings were dead. The Drexy ships had targeted everything. Homes, hospitals, schools. 3 school complexes, 2,000 children. The Drexy commander filed his report that evening. He described the operation as a disciplinary action and noted that the acceptable collateral damage would serve as a lesson to other human colonies who might resist Drexy interests. Acceptable collateral damage. The words spread across human space like fire through dry grass. On Earth, the United Terran Congress met in emergency session. The Great Hall was full beyond capacity. Representatives from every nation, every faction, every corner of human civilization sat together in terrible silence as the images from New Valencia played on the screens above them. Bodies in the streets. Buildings turned to ash. A child's shoe, alone in the rubble. President Chen Wei stood at the podium. His hands were steady, but his eyes were red. For 60 years, he said, we have asked the galaxy for respect. For 60 years, we have followed their rules, accepted their judgments, and waited for the recognition we deserve. For 60 years, we have believed that patience and diplomacy would earn us our place among the stars. He paused. The silence in the hall was absolute. 40,000 of our people are dead. 2,000 children will never grow up, and the Drexy have called this acceptable. His voice grew harder. No more petitions, no more requests, no more waiting. He looked out at the representatives before him. They looked back with one expression, one feeling, one purpose. The United Terran Congress hereby declares a state of war against the Drexy hegemony. This is not a threat. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. The declaration was broadcast across all frequencies, in every human language. It reached every corner of the galaxy within hours. The conclave species received it with confusion. The Drexy received it with amusement. How entertaining. At Meridian's Rest, the neutral trade station where the conclave met, Ambassador Elena Vasquez was packing her belongings. Her small quarters were nearly empty now. 60 years of her life dedicated to diplomacy, and it had all come down to this. A knock at her door. She opened it to find Delegate Vorath standing there, his long neck bent in what might have been curiosity. "Leaving so soon, Ambassador?" he asked. His tone was light, mocking. "Surely your little declaration doesn't mean you're giving up on the diplomatic process." Elena looked at him for a long moment. She remembered his laughter in the chamber. She remembered all the years of condescension, of dismissal, of being treated as less than nothing. She felt something unexpected. Not hatred. Pity. "I'm going home," she said quietly. "Running away?" Vorath's amusement was obvious. "No." Elena picked up her bag and stepped past him into the corridor. "I'm leaving, while there's still time for you to do the same." Vorath's laughter followed her down the hallway, but something in her voice had touched a nerve he didn't want to examine. Something in her eyes had looked at him, not as an enemy, not as a superior, but as someone who didn't understand the danger he was in. He pushed the feeling aside. Humans were young. Humans were weak. Humans had never won a major war against a galactic power. But as Elena Vasquez boarded her ship and set course for Earth, Vorath found himself unable to forget the expression on her face. It would haunt him in the months to come, as everything he believed about humans was proven terribly, catastrophically wrong. The breaking point had arrived. The galaxy had pushed too far, and humanity, for the first time in its history, had truly become one. Not in hope, not in celebration, in cold, unified fury. The Drexy High Command met 3 days after the human declaration of war. The mood in the chamber was relaxed, almost festive. Admiral Kresh stood before the holographic display, pointing at the small cluster of stars that represented human territory. 200 warships, he said confidently. "We will assemble the largest punitive fleet in hegemony history. The humans will see our strength and surrender within days." The other admirals nodded in agreement. 200 warships was overwhelming force. No species had ever resisted such numbers. "What do we know about human military capabilities?" asked one of the younger officers. Kresh waved his clawed hand dismissively. "They have defensive platforms, a small fleet of outdated vessels. Nothing that can stand against us. Their species has never fought a real war." This statement would prove to be catastrophically wrong. Across the galaxy, in the quiet halls of the Cathari Historical Institute, a different kind of meeting was taking place. Senior historian Aleph had been tasked with researching human history for the Cathari Military Council. What she found made her hands tremble as she prepared her report. "Humans have been fighting wars since before they developed written language," she told the assembled council members. Her voice was unsteady. "Their entire history is a record of conflict." She pulled up images on the display. Trenches filled with bodies. Cities reduced to rubble. Mushroom clouds rising over burning landscapes. This is what they call the First World War. Over 17 million dead. It lasted 4 years. She changed the image. "This is the Second World War. Over 70 million dead. They developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in an instant." The council members stared at the images in silence. "But the most disturbing discovery," Aleph continued, "is something they called the Cold War. For decades, Two human factions pointed weapons at each other that could have ended all life on their planet. They called their strategy mutually assured destruction. They were prepared to die, all of them, rather than surrender. A council member spoke up. Surely this is exaggeration. No species would risk total extinction over political differences. Aleph shook her head slowly. They invented the concept of total war. When humans fight, they do not stop until one side is completely destroyed or completely surrenders. There is no middle ground. There are no limited engagements. She paused, gathering her courage for the final piece of information. They have been preparing for this war for years, perhaps decades. Every colony, every station, every outpost has been quietly fortified. Their entire civilian economy can convert to military production within days. They have been waiting for this moment. The council chamber fell silent. On Earth, the transformation was already underway. Factories that had built farming equipment now produced weapons. Engineers who had designed buildings now designed warships. Scientists from rival institutions worked side by side, sharing secrets that had been guarded for generations. General Sarah Chen stood in the Strategic Operations Hub, watching the massive display that showed human space and beyond. Ships were moving into position. Resources were being allocated. A species of 8 billion individuals was becoming a single organism with a single purpose. Her staff gathered around her for the morning briefing. "They're assembling a fleet at their forward base," reported her intelligence officer. 200 warships. They plan to strike at Kepler's Gate within the week. Chen nodded slowly. "Our preparations there? Complete. We've been fortifying that system for 15 years. They have no idea what they're walking into." Chen turned to face her staff. These were officers who had studied war their entire lives. Not the polite, limited conflicts that the galaxy practiced, but real war. Human war. "They think this will be like their other wars," she said. "Fleet actions, negotiated surrenders, rules of engagement that protect both sides from real consequences." She pulled up the human military doctrine on the display. It was simple, brutal, and absolute. "We don't have rules of engagement. We have objectives. The objective is the complete and unconditional end of Drexy military capability. Everything else is secondary." 1 week later, Admiral Kresh led his fleet of 200 warships into the Kepler's Gate system. He expected to find a few defensive platforms, perhaps a dozen human ships at most. He expected fear and desperation. He expected surrender negotiations within hours. Instead, his sensors detected something that made his blood run cold. Contacts. Thousands of them, hidden among the asteroids, buried beneath the moons, waiting in the darkness between planets. They had been there for years, silent and patient, preparing for exactly this moment. "Admiral," his tactical officer whispered, his voice cracking with sudden fear. "They were already here. They've been waiting for us." Kresh stared at the display. His confident smile had disappeared. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he had never experienced before. Terror. The humans had not declared war in anger or desperation. They had declared war because they were ready. Every insult, every dismissal, every act of cruelty had been noted and remembered. And while the galaxy had laughed at them, they had been building, planning, preparing. 200 Drexy warships faced thousands of human weapons platforms, hundreds of warships, and a species that had spent its entire existence perfecting the art of destruction. Admiral Kresh gave the order to attack. It was the last order he would ever give. The Battle of Kepler's Gate was about to begin, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans stopped asking for respect and started demanding it. The Battle of Kepler's Gate lasted 11 hours. It felt like 11 years. Admiral Kresh had commanded fleets for 3 decades. He had fought 17 engagements and won them all. He knew war. He understood tactics. He had believed, truly believed, that superior numbers guaranteed victory. He was wrong. The humans did not fight like any species he had ever encountered. They did not form battle lines. They did not follow the traditional rules of naval engagement. They attacked from everywhere at once, using weapons and tactics that seemed almost insane. Suicide drones by the thousands threw themselves at Drexy ships, overwhelming point defense systems. Kinetic projectiles, launched days earlier at incredible speeds, slammed into the fleet from unexpected angles. Electronic warfare systems turned Drexy ships against each other, making allies fire on allies in the confusion. For every platform destroyed, two more seemed to appear. For every human ship that died, its crew took 3 Drexy vessels with them. Kresh watched his fleets die around him. 100 ships, 150, 180. "Admiral," his communications officer said, his voice hollow with shock. "They're offering us a chance to retreat." Kresh stared at the message. The humans were winning completely, absolutely, and they were offering mercy. He gave the order to withdraw. 23 ships, out of 200, limped away from Kepler's gate. The humans let them go. They wanted survivors. They wanted witnesses. The recordings from the battle spread across the galaxy within days. Military commanders watched in horror. Diplomats demanded emergency meetings. Species that had dismissed humans as children suddenly found themselves unable to sleep at night. But the humans did not stop to celebrate their victory. They did not pause to negotiate. Within 1 week of Kepler's gate, human forces struck 12 Drexy military installations simultaneously. Shipyards, weapons factories, training facilities. Every target was military. Not a single civilian structure was touched. The message was clear and terrifying. The humans could have destroyed everything, but they chose not to. The Conclave of 12 assembled in emergency session. Delegate Vorath, who had once laughed at Ambassador Vasquez, now stood before his colleagues with fear in his eyes. "We must respond," he urged. "If we allow the humans to defeat the Drexy without consequence, we show weakness. We must form a unified fleet and teach them their place." The chamber was silent. "Who will contribute ships?" asked the Thornaki presiding officer. No one answered. "The Cathari have prepared an analysis," said the Cathari representative, her wings folded tightly against her body. "Our military advisors believe that humans practice something called escalation dominance. Whatever force is used against them, they will exceed it. Whatever weapon is deployed, they will develop something worse." She looked around the chamber. The only way to defeat them would have been to destroy them completely in a first strike. That opportunity has passed. Now, the only option is to not fight them at all. "You suggest we do nothing?" Vorath's voice rose with outrage. "We are the Conclave. We rule this galaxy." "We ruled this galaxy," the Cathari corrected quietly. "The situation has changed." The Drexy hegemon sent desperate messages to every species he had once called ally. He begged for intervention. He promised trade agreements, territorial concessions, anything they wanted. No one responded. The Conclave, for the first time in its 1,000-year history, chose to do nothing. Each species looked at the recordings from Kepler's gate, looked at their own fleets, and decided that whatever the Drexy had done to earn human anger, it was not worth dying for. The Drexy were alone. 3 weeks after the declaration of war, human ships entered the Drexy home system. The hegemon watched them approach from his palace, waiting for the bombardment that would reduce his cities to ash. But the bombardment never came. Instead, 3 small vessels descended through the atmosphere and landed at the capital's central plaza. They broadcast a single message on all frequencies: "We want to talk." The hegemon stood at his window, trembling. This was not conquest. This was not revenge. The humans had destroyed his military, humiliated his species, and now they wanted to talk. He had expected cruelty. He had prepared for devastation. he would have understood hatred. This was something else entirely. The humans were offering him a chance to surrender with dignity. They were offering his people a future. After everything the Drexy had done, after the children of New Valencia, after 60 years of insults and dismissal, the humans were choosing mercy. The hegemon realized something that shook him to his core. The humans were not monsters. They were not mindless destroyers. They were something far more terrifying. They were controlled. They could have burned his world to glass, and they chose not to. They had the power to end his species, and they offered peace instead. He sent word to the human vessels. He would meet with them. He would listen to their terms. As he walked to the plaza, surrounded by guards who could do nothing to protect him, the hegemon understood the truth. The humans had not fought this war to destroy the Drexy. They had fought it to prove a point. Never again would the galaxy dismiss them. Never again would anyone call their losses acceptable collateral damage. Never again would humans be treated as children playing at civilization. The lesson had been taught. Now came the terms. The negotiation chamber had been a throne room once. Now it was simply a room with a table, 2 chairs, and the weight of history pressing down from every direction. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat on one side. The Drexy hegemon sat on the other. Between them lay a document that would reshape the galaxy. Elena studied the alien leader across from her. He looked older than his images suggested. The weeks since the war began had carved new lines into his scaled face. His eyes, which had once held such arrogance in diplomatic broadcasts, now showed only exhaustion. The terms are straightforward, Elena said, sliding the document across the table. Full reparations to the families of New Valencia. War crime tribunals for those who ordered the attack. Complete demilitarization of all systems within 50 light-years of human space. The hegemon read the terms slowly. His clawed hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages. Less than I expected, he admitted finally. What did you expect? The hegemon looked up at her. Extinction, enslavement, the destruction of our homeworld. He set the document down. That is what we would have done in your position. That is what any species would do. Elena shook her head slowly. No, not any species. I don't understand. The hegemon's voice cracked with genuine confusion. You have the power to take everything. Your fleets surround my world. Your weapons could turn our cities to glass. Why don't you? Elena was quiet for a long moment. She thought about New Valencia. She thought about the 2,000 children who would never grow up, never fall in love, never have children of their own. She thought about the anger that still burned inside her, the voice that whispered that the Drexy deserved everything they feared. She pushed that voice aside. Because we are not fighting to become what you are, she said finally. We are fighting to make sure you can never do this again. There is a difference. The hegemon stared at her. In all his years of rule, in all his studies of galactic politics, he had never encountered this philosophy. Power existed to be used. Victory existed to be exploited. Mercy was weakness. And yet here sat a human woman, representative of a species that had just proven itself capable of unimaginable destruction, offering terms that allowed his people to survive. He signed the document. The galaxy watched, and the implications spread like ripples in a pond. Species that had tolerated humanity's mistreatment for decades suddenly found urgent reasons to reach out. Apology messages flooded human communication channels. Trade delegations requested meetings. Former allies of the Drexy quietly distanced themselves, rewriting history to suggest they had always supported human rights. Delegate Vorath of the Rathani tried desperately to form a coalition against what he called human aggression. He sent messages to every species in the conclave, warning them that humans were dangerous, that they must be stopped before they grew too powerful. No one answered. The Rithani had been the loudest voice dismissing humanity for 60 years. Now, when they needed allies, they found only silence. One by one, species that Vorath had counted as friends sent polite refusals. Trade concerns, internal matters, prior commitments. The truth was simpler. No one wanted to be the next species to face human anger. Meanwhile, on the Cathari homeworld, a secret meeting was taking place. Senior diplomat Mira had requested a private audience with the human ambassador to her world. "We wish to propose an alliance," she said, her wings folded in the posture of formal submission. "A real alliance, not the empty agreements of the conclave, but a true partnership between our species." The human ambassador raised an eyebrow. "The Cathari have been part of the conclave for 800 years. Why would you want to ally with us?" Mira was silent for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "We always knew you were dangerous," she admitted. "From the first moment your ships entered our space, we recognized what you were. A predator species. Aggressive, territorial, capable of incredible violence." She looked up at the human ambassador. "We thought that made you useful. Buffer zones, labor pools, soldiers for conflicts we did not wish to fight ourselves. We never considered that it made you necessary." "Necessary for what?" "For change." Mira's voice grew stronger. "The conclave has ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. In that time, nothing has truly changed. The strong dominate the weak. The old species crush the young. The cycle continues forever." She spread her wings slightly, a gesture of openness. "You have broken the cycle. You have proven that power can be challenged, that the old order is not eternal. Do you understand what that means to species like mine? To the dozens of young species who have waited centuries for their chance to rise?" The alliance was formalized within the month. On New Valencia, reconstruction had begun. Where schools had once stood, memorials now rose. 40,000 names, carved in stone, arranged in spiraling patterns that caught the light of the planet's twin suns. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the memorial garden, watching as alien diplomats laid reeds at the base of the central monument. Cathari, Thornaki, even a few Drexi who had opposed the war and now sought reconciliation. A young human woman approached her. She was barely 20 years old, one of the few survivors of the attack. "Do you think it was worth it?" the woman asked. "All of this, the war, the death, everything that happened?" Elena looked at the names on the monument. Friends, colleagues, children she had watched grow up during her brief visits to the colony. "No," she said honestly. "Nothing could ever be worth this. Nothing could ever make it right." She turned to face the woman. "But now, because of what happened here, because of what we did in response, no other human colony will ever suffer the same fate. No other species will ever think our lives are acceptable collateral damage." The woman nodded slowly. Tears ran down her cheeks, but her voice was steady. "Then, we have to make sure it means something. We have to build something better." Elena put her hand on the woman's shoulder. "That's exactly what we're going to do." 5 years had passed since the end of the human-Drexi War. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council looked different now. Where 12 seats had once dominated the chamber, 17 now stood in a circle of equals. The Conclave of 12 had become the Council of 17, and humanity held not just one seat among them, but the rotating chair of emergency military response. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, now senior ambassador, watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. A dispute between two minor species was being resolved through negotiation rather than force. 5 years ago, the stronger species would simply have taken what it wanted. Now, they talked. They compromised. They found solutions. Change was slow, but it was real. In the corridors outside the council chamber, representatives of younger species gathered. Species that had been marginalized for centuries now approached human diplomats with requests for sponsorship, for protection, for alliance. A young Volani ambassador walked beside Elena after the session ended. His species had been considered worthless by the old conclave, too small and too weak to matter. "You changed everything," he said. "Not just for humans, for all of us." Elena shook her head. "We just proved that the old ways weren't inevitable. Every species has to choose its own path forward." "But you showed us it was possible." The Volani's large eyes were bright with hope. "You didn't just change your place in the hierarchy. You proved the hierarchy was a choice, that we could choose differently." On the former Drexy homeworld, different changes were taking shape. The hegemony had been dissolved. In its place, a new government was forming, built on principles that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. The new hegemon was a woman named Kestra, daughter of the leader who had signed the surrender. She had grown up in the shadow of her people's shame, and she had chosen to transform that shame into something else. Human advisors worked alongside Drexy reformers in her government. Demilitarization programs had become education initiatives. Weapons factories had been converted to schools. The species that had once attacked New Valencia was learning a new way to exist in the galaxy. Progress was painful. Many Drexy resisted the changes. They called Kestra a traitor, a puppet of human interests. But every year, more of her people saw the benefits of peace. Trade flourished. Children grew up without fear. The future looked brighter than the past. Kestra met with Elena once each year, on the anniversary of the treaty signing. They had become unlikely friends, bound together by the shared weight of history. "My father asked me something before he died," Kestra said during one of these meetings. "He asked why humans showed mercy when they had every reason to destroy us." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I didn't know, that I might never understand." Kestra looked at Elena with searching eyes. "But I think I'm beginning to. Mercy isn't weakness. It's a choice that requires more strength than revenge." On the Rathani homeworld, the atmosphere was different. The species that had once led the mockery of humanity now lived in isolation. Their former allies had abandoned them. Their economy had crumbled. Their pride had become a prison. Delegate Vorath, aged and diminished, requested a meeting with Ambassador Vasquez. She agreed, though she did not know why. They sat across from each other in a small conference room. Vorath looked nothing like the confident diplomat who had laughed at her years ago. His scales had dulled, his eyes had lost their shine. He was a broken creature, and he knew it. "I'm not here to apologize," he said. His voice was rough. "My pride won't allow it, even now." Elena waited. "But I need to understand something." Vorath leaned forward. "Why didn't you destroy us? When you won, when you had the power to wipe us from existence, why didn't you do it? We would have. Any species would have." Elena considered the question carefully. She had asked herself the same thing many times. "Because someone has to be willing to stop," she said finally. "Someone has to decide that the cycle ends. Every species in this galaxy has spent thousands of years following the same pattern. The strong crush the weak. The powerful exploit the powerless. Hatred breeds hatred forever." She looked at Vorath with something that might have been compassion. "We chose to be the ones who stopped. Not because we're better than you. Not because we couldn't have done terrible things. But because we decided that the future mattered more than revenge." Vorath was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "I don't understand you. I don't think I ever will." "That's okay," Elena said. "You don't have to understand us. You just have to live in the galaxy we're building." The Galactic Peacekeeping Academy opened its doors 1 year later. Human instructors stood before alien cadets, teaching lessons that went beyond tactics and strategy. They taught ethics, proportionality, the protection of civilians, the laws of war that humans had written in blood across centuries of their own terrible history. A young Cathari cadet raised her wing during one lecture. Her instructor, a human colonel named James Okonkwo, called on her. "Is it true," she asked, "that your species nearly destroyed itself? Multiple times?" The colonel smiled sadly. He had served in the war against the Drexy. He had seen what humans were capable of, both good and evil. "Yes," he said, "we came close to ending everything, several times. We developed weapons that could have killed every living thing on our planet, and we almost used them. Then how were you here? How did you survive?" Colonel Okonkwo walked to the window of the classroom. Outside, cadets from a dozen species trained together on the academy grounds. Cathari flew alongside Villani. Drexy worked with Thornaki. The future was taking shape before his eyes. "We learned," he said simply. "We learned what happens when no one chooses to stop. We learned the cost of hatred, and we decided it was too high to pay." He turned back to face his students. "That's why you're here. That's why this academy exists. Not to make you better at war, but to make war the last option instead of the first. To break the cycle that has trapped this galaxy for thousands of years." The Cathari cadet nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. Far away, on Earth, the planet turned slowly beneath the stars. Blue oceans and green continents. White clouds drifting across the atmosphere. An impossibly fragile world that had somehow produced a species capable of both terrible destruction and incredible compassion. The galaxy had learned many lessons from humanity. They had learned that humans were not to be underestimated. They had learned that human anger was something to be feared. They had learned that human military capability surpassed anything they had imagined. But the greatest lesson, the one that would reshape civilizations for millennia to come, was simpler and more profound than any of these. Humans did not fight because they loved war. They fought because they had learned, at terrible cost, exactly what peace was worth. And they were willing to do whatever it took to build a galaxy where peace was possible for everyone. The new order had begun. The old patterns were breaking, and somewhere, in the memorial garden on New Valencia, 40,000 names stood in silent testament to the price of change. It had cost everything, but it had meant something.